I don't believe in any practice that's a complete path, right? Everybody has to find out through heuristics, through experimentation, what works for their temperament, what works for their body. But I think any practice can be overdone.
Yeah.
Any container, it's natural when it's in its right place. But as soon as you take it past, then it becomes another crutch and can disrupt the system. There was a study done in Finland over 30 years, and people who do contrast therapy 5 days a week have a 60% lower overall mortality rate.
Oh, wow.
There's nowhere else where you can find those types of statistics. For a natural practice where you're not taking any type of medicine, any type of pharmaceutical, it's just hot, cold, hot, cold. It's magic.
Welcome to Grab Eyes, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, John Vargas. Just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do does not reflect the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And today I have my guest, Reed Wasser, who has a wellness sanctuary that's right down the street from my house. And I ended up meeting him at the gym a couple of years ago, and we've been trying to do this podcast episode for a couple months now because I kept meeting people that have been there who were raving about it, and I finally got him to come down. So it was a really fascinating topic to talk about cold plunging, the power of cold plunging, the power of breath work. He explains in detail the power of the breath. I mean, it blew my mind. It was a very educational episode on a lot of stuff. We had a really great conversation about human consciousness, which I didn't expect for it to go that way. And he's a brilliant man on many topics. It was a very fascinating interview and conversation. So it was really helpful, man. So everyone, check out this episode. If you can't listen to the whole thing, you have to. It was really awesome. So thank you everyone for supporting us. If you can like and subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, it helps the algorithm sustain its growth for it to get to other people. It really helps. Thank you very much. I love you.
It's time for Grab Lives.
Yeah, you got to keep it punk rock, dude.
I completely agree. Completely. This is Long Beach.
Yeah, you know what's crazy is like punk rock music is, I don't know, there's a cool message to it, and especially metal music as well. You know, they hold this, I guess, this angst against the government, you know, to be free from the chains
Absolutely.
that they provide.
Yeah. Yep. It
You know
is.
what I mean?
It is anti-establishment, anti-authority, self-empowerment, liberation, freedom. Sometimes to a fault.
It's almost too much.
Punk rock it can be. I mean, there's different, obviously, as you know, there's different types of punk rock. There's different bands, there's different messages.
Yeah, totally.
But overall, I mean, it's about being free. Yeah, for sure.
So everyone who's listening, welcome. I have a good friend here, Reed Wasser. We've been trying to do this for a couple months now, and I met Reed in the sauna a couple years ago, back in 2021. And I met Reed when I was going through some serious issues with my head injury, and we were just talking, and you know, it was just I had to, I don't know, get through what I had to get through first, that part of my transformation. But yeah, I met him a long time ago, and then every single time I'd run into people and they'd ask, "Hey, do you know that guy Reed? He does like cold plunges over in Long Beach." And I was like, dude, I met that guy a long time ago, and like I was supposed to go to his events and it never happened. So I ended up going to his business called Human Eon, and we did some breath work today. Wim Hof method. Is that the Wim Hof method?
It's a variation of Wim Hof.
Of it.
Yeah, very similar to it.
So we're going to talk today about everything Reed offers. And my biggest thing is bringing the community together, and here in Long Beach, because this is where I live. And the best thing to do is to bring everyone together, and because we heal together. That's right. How it works. It doesn't work on an individual scale. So that's my biggest approach towards my own healing. And I've noticed I'm way more open And if I'm not open and reserved towards others, I'm closed off for a reason. So that's something I have to look into. You know what I mean? So yeah, brother, if you don't mind introducing yourself and talking about whatever you like to talk about for your intro.
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Reed Wasser, and I am from Long Beach, California. We're in the south side of Long Beach, California. I am the founder of Human Aeon, which is a local business. It's a wellness sanctuary that is actually in a very large house. So it's sort of a hybrid business. It's semi-private, although it is a public business. And it is equipped with a meditation and breathwork hall, an in-ground ice bath surrounded by a beautiful garden, a hot tub for hydrotherapy, infrared sauna, steam sauna, a movement space where people do yoga and capoeira and exercise, and we have some equipment. And the idea with Human Aeon, excuse me, is that we're offering people a sanctuary to be able to practice the foundations of natural health. And so each session is a 90-minute session that you book at Human Aeon, and either myself or one of the Human Aeon instructors takes you through this 90-minute session of breathing techniques, meditative stillness, movement, and contrast therapy, which is heat and cold exposure. I'm a Wim Hof Method instructor. I learned Wim Hof Method in 2016. And then in 2018, I became an instructor directly under Wim Hof. And been doing Wim Hof workshops ever since.
So you met him before?
Yeah, I trained with him for a
cool.
year on and off. So I met him several times. Also, I'm a capoeira professor. So I've been studying and teaching capoeira for 15 years. Movement is a big part of my life, and it's a big part of my health and wellness protocol. I've also been teaching meditation since the 90s, various types of meditations, different schools, different lineages. Really, to me, I see that if human beings have the right environment, the right community, the right people around them, and the basic instruction on how to apply ancient methods like exercise, movement, meditation, breathing, hot and cold, methods that have been verified by modern science without a lot of the extra accessory commentary or fluff, I like to call it, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're able to access the heart of practices that bring the human body and human mind and physiology to wellness, then we all thrive together. And being that I'm from Long Beach, I've always wanted to open a wellness sanctuary here to be able to offer it to my community. Because I don't think it's enough. Like you were saying, it's not enough to just do it on my own. If we're not lifting people up around us, what's the point? Getting there by yourself. I mean, to me, that's not really winning. That's the basic, fix your shit, figure yourself out for sure. But when I find something that works for me, my first intention is to go deep and really figure it out, really practice it, become proficient in whatever method, practice, or application it is, and then offer it to the people around me. So that's what Human Aeon is. That's the mission. That's the goal. Yeah.
It's a great approach, man. And I get what you're talking about too. You really do have to go deep into each individual practice and see what works for you.
Yeah.
And then you can play around with it. Like it doesn't have to be this strict, this is the only way it is. You know what I mean? I've come across certain people where they say, oh, this is the only way. I got to do Kriya yoga and study under this yoga practitioner and follow their path. And that becomes another form of religion, you know what I mean? Or even like a cult. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. We're so versatile, and you want to mess around with what really works for you. Because personally for me, like I do cold plunge, and then sometimes I feel like I need to do sauna, sauna for a week,
for sure.
So I think the best thing is when you go deep, you gain a relationship with yourself, and you learn what your body needs. You really have to have a common link of that like relationship and that communication
Yeah.
with what your consciousness needs at the moment. And specifically for me in my work life, like I have to know what I need, you know what I
Right.
mean? And because if I come home from work like with no sleep
Yeah.
and my nervous system is fried out,
Mm-hmm.
and if I just go to the gym and just work out really hard, I'm gonna feel like shit after.
Absolutely.
You know, so there is a bit of intelligence with understanding that communication.
Yep.
And you really have to listen. You have to learn the art of listening and what that has to offer. You know what I mean?
I think it's easy to get stuck in a practice.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you figure out a practice like Wim Hof method, or a form of exercise, or a form of meditation, or you do kriyas under Yogi Bhajan or whatever other yogi there may be, and it works, and it will work, and you can and should go deep with it. But regardless, it's still a container. There are still going to be limitations. I think that life is the complete path, and everything else is a container of life that you have to learn how to compartmentalize. You know, it's when do you open which container, you know?
That's such a good way to put that.
Yeah. And I feel that way for every practice, for every method. I mean, I'm a Wim Hof method instructor. I'm into it. I think it's great. I think I call it a gateway drug into wellness, because you do the breathing practice, you feel amazing. You've accessed endorphins, you've triggered dopamine and epinephrine, norepinephrine, anandamide, oxytocin, all these happy hormones. You've created alkalinity in the blood. You do the ice bath. You've gone through a stressor. You've shocked the body. You reap all of these great benefits, but it only goes so far. And it's unavoidable. You can't, it's not a complete path. I don't believe in any practice that's a complete path, right? Everybody has to find out through heuristics, through experimentation, what works for their temperament, what works for their body. You know, some people have autoimmune issues, other people don't, you know, and it's about accessing what works at the right time. So,
yeah. Dude, I love how you talk about the foundation, because if your foundation is rocky, it's not built on, you know, fertile soil,
right,
how can you grow?
right,
You know, so it really starts there, and it starts with the breath. It's such a fundamental way how we can go into the continuity of how we can find balance with the nervous system and how we can operate through balance.
right.
And so I'd love for you to kind of talk about breath. And I've read the book Breath by James McNester, and I've studied different modalities of breath like pranayama and so forth. So I'd love for you to start on the fundamental practice of what breath offers and how powerful breath can be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Breath is literally what gives us life in the form of energy in the body. And that energy gives us the ability to move. Movement is life, right? When we die, we're totally still. That's why I call meditation practice the little death. You're learning how to surrender and give up to the impetus to move. And so you're practicing a psychological death when you sit perfectly still, which is a very valuable practice, both physiologically and psychologically. Also can be taken too far. I've been guilty of that with meditation, where I use meditation as essentially a drug, right? Because at a certain point, it feels really good that you could access these higher states. Breath work should come before meditation. And breath is the first thing that we do when we're born. We breathe. We take a deep breath. And every breath that we take, right, we breathe in air. The body takes the oxygen, puts the oxygen in the blood. The heart pumps the oxygenated blood to the tissues, to the cells. Inside of the cell is mitochondria, right? It's an organelle, the powerhouse of the cell. Gets a hold of the oxygen and creates aerobic combustion of ATP. So it literally liberates energy from the oxygen, which is also the most flammable gas that we know of. So that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is energy, which gives the cell, it gives the tissue, it gives the body the ability to move. All other functions, all other physiological functions, the miracle of life comes from this exchange with the universe, which is respiration. And in ancient times, our ancestors figured out that they could access the power of breathing through switching patterns, whether you breathe extra deep or extra shallow for long periods of time, or you pulse, where you do, like a Wim Hof method or a pranayama, where you do like cycles of very deep breaths, and then you either pause, or you do a breath hold, or you do a muscle contraction that's timed with the breath hold, or you utilize your voice or a mantra with a type of breathing. There's many, many different types of breathing patterns and breathing techniques that have been used all over the world in different in shamanic cultures and indigenous cultures, and in every part of the world, whether it was Europe or Africa or Asia. Some became very popular, like the pranayama of the yogis, or certain shamanic breathing practices that have been done in Latin America for well over 1,000 years. Many different types of practices, thousands of different types of breathing techniques, as you'll read about in James Nestor's book or many other books on breathing. At Human Aeon, right, what we do is we take all different types of breathing techniques and we categorize them into 4 categories or 4 containers. We don't teach any new methods. I don't believe that there are such things as new breathing methods. They've all been used before. But if you can understand the mechanics of the breath and what the inhale does physiologically versus the exhale, what a breath hold does after you've pulsed really deep breathing, what happens if you starve your body for breath slowly over a long period of time. All of these have different physiological effects. So the first type of breathing we call solar breathing, which is any type of breathing technique where you utilize intentional hyperventilation, like a Wim Hof method, a pranayama. There are many different types of breathing techniques where you use over breathing, like we did this morning, right? Big, deep breaths from your belly. The second type of category we call, or the second category of breathing, is lunar breathing. Any type of breath work that you do where you utilize hypoventilation, which creates a thirst for air, which makes CO2 rise in the blood, which when you can sit with the rising of the CO2, which is generally very uncomfortable, it teaches the body CO2 tolerance, how to utilize the CO2 so that the cells can breathe more efficiently. And from Zen monks to the Buteyko method to oxygen advantage, all of these different techniques are various breathing patterns that you can use to train that physiological reflex. The third category of breathing is any type of breath work or breathing practice you can do as you go about your day, or as you're speaking in a podcast or driving in your car. They're safe. They're anchored in long cyclical breaths that anchor your awareness in the present moment and that keep your blood alkaline, right? That keeps your mind sharp, like a box breathing or a physiological sigh or just continuous conscious breath work. The fourth category of breathing is what we call visionary breath work or shamanic breath work. This is where, like, advanced Wim Hof method, where people call that DMT breathing, where you breathe to the point where you access endogenous DMT that your lungs and pineal gland make. And you have these deep visionary experiences similar to an ayahuasca or a DMT. Holotropic breath work, which was invented in the 60s and 70s by Stanislav Grof, is a type of visionary breath work. So any type of breathing that causes you to have a non-ordinary or altered state of consciousness is the fourth type. So my intention at Human Aeon with breathing is that we are able to show practitioners why and how to access a breathwork pattern that already exists, when and why to access it. Are you struggling with energy in the morning? You should access over breathing. You should do a solar breathwork practice. Is your nervous system in a constant fight or flight state due to some sort of a trauma? You can't slow your mind down, ruminating thoughts, etc., etc. I would recommend practicing a lunar breathing practice that day where you slow everything down completely. So to me, it's about understanding that our breath is a fulcrum of our physiological state and psychological state. It is the bridge between the somatic and autonomic nervous systems, which means that autonomically or automatically, you're already breathing without having to pay attention to it, right? If you had to think about every breath that you took, if it was fully somatic, then we wouldn't get much we wouldn't get much done during the day because we'd be concentrating on taking our next breath. So it's an autonomic process. But you can hack that process by just that was somatic. I chose to do it voluntarily. And just that breath changed my state. It changed the ratio of oxygen to CO2 in my blood, right? It caused a small rise in adrenaline. I can feel it through that deep inhale. And if I kept doing it, it would continue to change my state deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's not something that is, when I say change my state, it sounds something that's a little bit like superfluous. But these are measurable physiological states, right? Heart rate, blood gas ratio, hormones, all of these things, they're measurable. You can measure the shift in state on a Apple Watch or on an Oura Ring. So breathwork is really the gateway, I think, to modern physiological and psychological health. And when you understand how to breathe at any given moment, then you take the power back, right? You take the power to choose the state that you want to be in, right? Ruminating thoughts, frustrated desires, emotional attachments to habits, memories, things that don't serve us. Maybe breathwork isn't going to heal all of your past trauma, but breathwork is going to give you the tool in the moment to take your state back. So the trauma is a matrix that sits in your cells. It's a form of memory, subconscious memory. And it has its own breathing pattern. It has, if you are able to pay attention in a trauma state, you'll notice that you don't take full breaths. You'll notice these little pauses, these little skips in the way that you're breathing. Your body may shiver, right? All of these pain responses to past pain, to something in the past. In the moment, you may be in your house with incense burning, food on the table, all of the most wonderful things, but you're stuck. Your psyche, your nervous system has been trained to be in this state from the past that hurt so bad. In that moment, you can take your state back through breathing. And you can use breathing to go deeper into it, to actually heal it, and to go deeper into the roots of it. Although, generally speaking, most people, at least in the beginning, should receive coaching on how to really do that. I don't think breath is enough to fully, I believe in therapy. I believe in movement and exercise and different somatic processes and practices. I believe that most of the time, in order to really go deep enough to heal ourselves from the natural trauma, it feels unnatural, but it's natural to carry trauma in this life. It's natural to be traumatized to some degree and to have to go through some healing of PTSD or complex PTSD or just painful memories, however you want to categorize it on the psychological scale. I believe that we need shock as well. And sometimes we can shock ourselves through deep, deep breathwork practices, like a holotropic breathing or a Wim Hof method advanced breathwork, where you feel like you're teleported to another dimension outside of time and space. I believe in plant medicine when used correctly in a ceremonial or in the right space. I also believe in a recreational space if it's done responsibly. But really, like cold and heat, shock therapy, sometimes training movement and exercise to the point of a shock, or sitting in stillness meditation, like for 10 days, like a retreat, like you would do at a Vipassana retreat, or breathing to the point of an altered state. These types of shocks, I believe, are crucial in healing and embodiment and in integration. We have a lot of stuck energy.
Yeah.
Every human being does. If you grow up in this society, I mean, we're here in Long Beach, you've seen things and have experienced things that the body takes time to compartmentalize and to understand and to integrate. And I think that learning where the breath like sits in or fits in with all of that is absolutely crucial. You could easily control your heart rate by switching your breathing pattern, and it doesn't take that much effort. You just have to know how to do it. And obviously, like having an elevated heart rate, being in a stressed state, in a traumatized state, these are things you can actually snap yourself right out of in the moment by learning how to breathe. Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude. That was a lot of great information.
I
don't
go
even
on
know
and
where
on.
to start, man. No, it's, I think, we are trying to reinvent the wheel with some people thinking we can do that because we're Americans and we like to just capitalize on everything, And so I met a lot of communities that like are pseudo spiritual, and that they become a breathwork practitioner. You see this all over the place, man. And I think they move past the fundamentals. You know what I mean? And I think that's just because I can read people well. You know what I mean? And I think I just want to get to the basics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On how we can use these methods every single day. And for everyone listening, I think a good place to start is an app called Breathwork. I don't know if you've ever used that app.
No.
Amazing app to teach you. I mean, you could pick from Breathwork before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Breathwork to regulate stress. Breathwork to focus.
It's awesome.
And you could choose these different modalities on whatever mood you're in. Because we're multidimensional. We're always multifaceted. We're always interchangeable with our minutes of the day through time and space, right? So that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
With your practice. And then
For sure.
the deeper you can go into it, man, you really find that how powerful it really is. I love the fact that you say you can take your power back.
Yeah.
Because that is so important and vital for us to take our power back to who we truly are, and to honor the divinity within through each human experience. And, you could do whatever you want, all the talk therapy and stuff, but we have to honor our humanness.
Yeah.
And our primal nature for who we are. We have to come back to that, because if we try to escape that, that's not what we're here to do.
We have to learn how to trust it again as well.
Yeah, I love that.
And how to trust our natural, instinctive drive to live. And that doesn't always fit in with where society is going. Which is generally more automated, where we're being served things. Dinner comes to our doorstep, fully served. Amazon delivers there's no more hunter-gatherer. Our hunting and gathering is now done with our fingertips.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying these are bad things, but there are definitely downsides to them that we're going to feel the recoil in society with our physical and mental health. And trusting the urge to move, trusting the urge to take a deeper breath, the urge to be autonomous from living in a world that is filled with straight lines. I like that we're both sitting half lotus in these chairs, because the chairs weren't designed this way.
Right.
Driving in straight lines, moving in straight lines, operating according to a time construction that was made up in the Middle Ages, what is it, Gregorian time system, and these, in a sense, oppress the natural instinct to be alive and to move freely and to follow our drive to live. I don't think they're good. It's good or bad. I don't see it as progress or not progress. I think it's a natural, to some degree, even the unnatural elements are natural extensions of human society. But when we're able to take the power back and break the mental constraints, I think it's a really powerful thing. I think that it's part of the root and the foundation of mental wellness, physiological wellness, psychological wellness. And the great thing is that it's so accessible. All of the different breathwork apps, all of the different exercise programs, different styles of meditation, different ways to do an ice bath. Wim Hof method is not the only way to do an ice bath. There are different techniques you can use. It's about, to me, it's about returning to the element, the simple element, and are you present? Do you feel well inside of your body? Do you feel well inside of your environment? And if the answer is no to any of these things, then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to do, it's easy. There's a lot of fancy, practices, schools with, embellished philosophies, and, more power to it all. I think it's great. But to me, I think that the answer is really it's not even in front of us. It's inside of us, Yeah.
I love how you put that, man. And I love the fact, though, we're talking about fundamentals of how we're designed. And the thing I think is, if we have poor guidance, that's why we have a lot of people in dis-ease, which means you're not at ease. That's where a lot of the sickness starts coming in combustion form and starts manifesting in the body and manifesting in our health. And if you're sick in your mental body and your emotional body and your physical body, it means you're not in alignment with natural law or universal law. Because when you're talking about linear fashion, things are not linear. We think in a logical linear sense, but that is a limitation. And we have to understand things are moving in cyclic nature, and they move in cycles and they move in spirals. That is the essence of how things are designed through universal law. Even looking at the Fibonacci sequence, the Fibonacci sequence is this essence of this pattern that creates everything.
And there's no straight lines.
There's no straight lines. There's no straight lines, dude. It's truly powerful.
Yeah.
And if we understand, even the cell is as a circle, a sphere, and its spherical nature and how it moves in a polarized position, that is, if we can come back to that and take out this misinformation we've been taught since we were children, and then from our generations, we can take back our power just through going back to these fundamental understandings. And so I truly understand too, our breath is cyclic. It's the beginning and the end to something. It's the inhale and the exhale, and how powerful it is when you're in that spherical state with the power of the breath to come back and to center. Because the whole thing is about coming into balance, right? And we've just been imbued with this idea, even through allopathic medicine, that we're just trying to take away something or give you something to fix the symptom. And we want to go into just finding balance and harmony. That's the true essence of what each person's designed to do. But if we're taking away that power of understanding that it's out of balance, or we just have to come back into balance, then we're coming into a physiological state of well-being and healing. Because healing is always going to happen, right? It's in every second, every minute of the day, you may have to come into balance, but these tools are designed, going back to the fundamentals of breathing. You're designed to use this, to come into a state, to use this as a superhuman nature of who you're designed to be. And I studied tumo breathing by Tibetan monks. And that was a really fascinating method I had learned because they use it as a visualization technique as well,
Right.
where they visualize the fire at the base of the spine. And they'll use this breathing technique to bring in heat in the body. So they could regulate temperature regulation in the body.
Yeah.
They can now improve anti-aging hormone effects in the body. And they could also use it to empty the mind into what they call I guess stillness or an empty awareness is what it's designed to be, right?
Shunyata.
What's that
Emptiness.
word?
Emptiness.
Emptiness.
Yeah, it's the emptiness that's described in the most of the Tibetan or Mahayana Buddhist lineages, which Dumo is one of the practices that is one of the practices, right? Depending on what lineage. There's different lineages in Tibet.
Right.
Dumo is one of the 6 yogas of Naropa. So Naropa was a great master that lived a little over 1,000 years ago. And there's like a whole lineage of yogic Buddhist yogis that come from that tradition. It influenced Wim Hof method, the Dumo practice. I think Dumo is great. There's a great book called The Biography of Milarepa. Milarepa is known as the greatest yogi of Tibet. And he has a great story, and it's all about his Dumo practice and where Dumo took him, where his inner fire took him. Where did you learn the Dumo?
I trained under a Kung Fu master.
Cool.
And so he teaches Taoist breathing techniques.
Cool.
And that was one of the teachings of understanding what that offers,
That's awesome.
And he's kind of strict in how he's always looking at me. He's like, hey, you're breathing, you're not belly breathing, And so I just learned so much from him. But he teaches in riddles. And so it's really hard to learn from him, especially because he can barely speak English.
Is he here in Long Beach?
Yeah, he's
Sifu Sim?
Yeah, Sifu Sim.
Cool. Yeah. He teaches Dumo.
He teaches variations of it, and
Okay.
I had to pry it out of him because he has his kung fu classes, and I had to ask questions from him personally to get information from him. Because if you don't ask, you don't get the answers.
He's a kung fu master. That's how it works.
I know. So I would have to bring him aside and ask certain questions on chi balance and life force energy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to specifically feed you that information. You had to earn it from
You have
him.
to ask it. Yeah.
So it's
For
like,
sure.
especially being a student, it causes a lot of humility for oneself when you're relearning how to come back to the fundamentals. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it can be a hard place to break old patterns. And I think for me specifically, I just noticed my nervous system is very dysregulated because of my career.
Sure.
For, 15 years of working a platoon 24-hour shift schedule, my nervous system's fried, and I think it's the fight or flight response and the hypervigilance of this always being aware.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn how to turn that off whenever I could and then turn it on when I can. And that's the fine balance what I need to be, because I do need to use that state when I'm going to incidents or when I'm on shift.
Absolutely.
But I do want to honor the fact that I have this power within me to be able to shift back and forth of transmutation whenever I want.
Yep.
And I think that's what I want to teach and instill to people, that they can do this as well by going back to the basics.
Have you ever heard of polyvagal theory?
No.
Polyvagal theory is a theory of the nervous system developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. And up until, recently, or even now, the main model of the autonomic nervous system is that the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that is generally known to be involuntary or uninfluenceable by our intention, by our will. Now, Wim Hof, Swami Rama, some other great men have proven in scientific settings that the autonomic nervous system is not so autonomic. For example, Wim Hof claimed that he can control his immune system. And so they brought him to Radboud University, shot him up with the endotoxin E. coli, and he didn't get sick. He brought 12 people to his retreat, taught them, who had never done his practice. In 4 days, all 12 people were able to do the same thing. So that changed. That's one of the many things that has changed the model to where it's like, okay, the immune system is not so autonomic. You can actually influence it with your breath, with your mind. Swami Rama used to change the the pulse in his fingers, in his fingertips. He would have one that would go faster, one that would go slower. He would stop his heartbeat for 17 or 20 seconds. He would change the temperatures in his hands by 10 degrees with his mind. So we know that the autonomic nervous system is not simply autonomic, but it's generally autonomic or generally automatic for most people. And that nervous system is usually divided into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight state or mobilization, right? So it co-evolved with nature over hundreds of thousands of years when we were hunter-gatherers. We would leave the cave, we would leave the dwelling, and have to hunt down prey, run from predators, freeze in cold temperatures, go long time without eating, run and, whatever we had to do to survive. That's the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight state. We need it. We need heightened awareness at times. We need survival instinct. It's a good thing, right? It got us here. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. It's the calm state. It's when the hunter-gatherer is back in the dwelling and they're eating, they're reproducing, they're relaxing, right? So these two states, it's kind of like yin and yang, right? This has been the model of the autonomic nervous system thus far. Stephen Porges came along and recognized that there is also that the parasympathetic nervous system can be divided into like a higher and lower, right? Immobilization, right? With mobilization, the sympathetic nervous system in between. So there's the free state, which is like we all experience when we come across some sort of a trauma. People often will freeze up. If you're not comfortable, if you don't feel safe at a party or on stage, or if you're actually under a serious threat, many people freeze up instead of going into fight or flight, and they're immobilized. Yeah, it's like the possums or fainting goats. This is a part of the nervous system that essentially is a response to extreme threat. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system that is the socialized, relaxed state. So he calls it the ventral vagal, which is the socialized, relaxed state that we should feel when we're at a party or when we're with friends, where you don't feel mobilized, you're not in fight or flight, you're calm, you're relaxed, and you're able to connect with other people. You're embodied. You're not in a trauma state. You're not sensing a threat, whether real or just perceived, right? And then the ventral vagal is the free state, right? So the nervous system gets stuck in patterns. And when we're in trauma states, right, it's generally somewhere between a fight or flight and a freeze state. And you could witness this in real time. Your heart rate, your breathing, your body may shiver, all of these things, it becomes a matrix that just it's a state that just comes up and is triggered by either something in the environment or something in our psyches. Being able to witness it in real time and see that there is, for example, a breathing pattern, a movement pattern in the body, right? Thought patterns, emotional patterns, all of these rise up. And if we're paying attention, we can see it, we can take advantage of it. It actually becomes a doorway into self-knowledge. It actually becomes the thing that heals us. That trauma state, that dis-ease, that discomfort, that freeze state, that fight or flight state becomes the portal to us taking the power back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
It
Dude, I'm
becomes
learning so much right now.
It becomes a gem.
Interesting.
And a lot of the time we don't want it. We don't want to be stuck in the fight or flight state. We don't want to be stuck in the ruminating thoughts from a past relationship where the lover broke our heart and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We don't want to be stuck in the traumatic state, when we lost a loved one or whatever you experience as a firefighter and a first responder, the things that you have seen, that you have to carry in your psyche. But these types of traumas, this type of pain becomes the book that you got to study,
Yeah.
because it is nature reflected in your human organism. It's completely natural.
Yeah.
You know, it's the way that we deal with pain instinctively. But it's also the food for practice.
Right. Dude, so it's crazy, man. Like I'm learning so much from you. I wasn't prepared to learn so much, but I'm very happy right now. No, because you know
I'm
what's
glad I'm
crazy,
making
man?
sense.
No, yeah, you make sense to me, because when I started my own path of healing, I was just really sick, man. My nervous system was fried.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really bad concussion. I had issues with addiction.
Yeah.
I had intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
I had just my emotions. I couldn't even reach my emotions with a 10-foot pole, because I was so numb and blocked off from the truest form of who I was, or who I am,
Yeah.
that I couldn't even get to the truest form of who I am
Right.
because of all this. And so it took a while through digging and siphoning through all of this,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be like that anymore. You know,
Yeah.
it took through desperation to find inspiration,
Sure.
to want to find peace,
Yeah.
you know, and I didn't feel good in my body,
Right.
you know, and that's where I really want to feel safe in my body at all times,
Yeah.
and not feel pain,
Sure.
chronic pain, you know, because I was living in chronic pain for years, and it was just because I was stuffing it. I was just drinking and just numbing myself,
Yeah.
because I just wanted to feel nothing anymore,
Yeah.
you know, and it was crazy when I opened up my awareness and awakened to who I am. I started to notice what was out of balance. And I would now be like, holy shit, dude, I got a lot to unravel here and uncover and to sit with,
Yeah.
you know, and that's why I started doing all these different practices, because I would see the state I'm in.
Right.
When I would do breath work, I would see my thoughts just ramble, and like
Sure.
just, I'd be like, dude, wow, what is going
Yeah,
on? You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like, but it is when you start to dabble with these, you know, practices and these modalities, you start to find who you are and where your state is. And when you find that your state is actually not in balance, you realize, okay, have a compassionate
Yeah.
opinion about it with
Yeah.
yourself. Be like,
How
dude,
could it be in balance?
right?
With everything, a first responder, a firefighter, a police officer. By the way, we at Human Aeon, we offer 20% discounts, heroes discounts to anyone in that industry.
Oh, cool.
Because our goal there is to, yes, it's to make a business, but essentially the reason why we're doing it the way we're doing it is because I want to elevate the community that nurtured me growing up. And to do that, you have to offer it to the people that are actually out there saving lives. The ones that believe that their feelings don't help them save lives.
Yeah,
Even though it's their feelings that got them there in the first place.
for sure.
But when you're in and day out saving lives and, you know, responding to alarms and in alarming situations and having to work in a mobilized fight or flight state all the time, actually a fight state, because y'all ain't fleeing. You guys are going right into it.
Right.
And it's fight, 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 fight. Well, it doesn't seem like your feelings are going to serve you. And maybe in the moment they wouldn't, because you have to rise to the occasion. But that doesn't mean that they're not there. And that doesn't mean that they don't build up. And it also doesn't mean that that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a process. Like you said, it's not a straight line. It doesn't have to be yes or no, right? Okay, maybe in the moment when you need to actually go save lives, yeah, you shouldn't be in an emotional state. It's not about that. It's about being in the moment and going. But that doesn't make them disappear. And knowing what to do with your psyche, knowing what to do with your physiology, to cultivate balance, to work with whatever pain you're carrying. It's a great thing, right? It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that we have. And it's not that complicated. It's very simple. making time for yourself, remembering to make time for yourself at the end of the day to sit in stillness or to sleep better or to breathe deeper or to reset through an ice bath that only takes 2 minutes. 2-minute ice bath, I think, when it comes to time, is the greatest return on investment you can get for your health.
Yeah, let's
Because
talk about that.
in 2 minutes of ice water submerged to your chin, hands on your thighs, like everything in, if you can, 2 minutes will shock the nervous system, create a flood of happy hormones that will last for a while. It will shock the immune system to where the immune system will create 200 to 300% more white blood cells for 6 days after 2 minutes in ice water. There's nothing else that you can take that has no negative side effects that will do that for the body. The mental toughness that you have to train to go into that sort of stressor, you take that with you into every other stressor of your life, right? You're training in a serious stressor, right? Which is called a hormetic stressor. A hormetic stressor is a stressor that makes the body stronger and healthier versus, low-lying stress, which has cortisol and cytokine inflammation, the type of stress that we experience when we freak out on the freeway because someone cuts us off, or something you get in the boardroom because there's a perceived threat that your boss didn't like something, or what a low-lying stressors, almost we can say artificial stressors. Ice water is one of the most primal fears that every human being and every mammal experiences, right? It is a primal fear. And when you can confront that and face that and surrender and submerge willingly, and then in the moment when all of your vasculature, every inch of your blood vessels, which we probably have around 70,000 miles of in the body, start to contract. This is a painful process. And to sit and surrender to that is, the payoff is incredible. The way that it influences the nervous system is incredible. And how we can work through traumas with that. And when the trauma arises, facing it like it's an ice bath. A trauma is similar to the fear that we have when we get into an ice bath. Your amygdala, 2 little almond-shaped glands on either side of the limbic system. It's your fear center, your alarm center. When you get into the cold water, your amygdala is saying, you have to get out. This is going to kill you. This is going to do this. Oh my God, your fingers. Oh, you're going to have frostbite. You can't move your feet right now, and you freak out, or people can freak out. This is, the amygdala, the fear center, is a good thing. You need to have a fear center in order to survive. You need to be able, the human organism, every mammal needs to perceive real threats. That might be a predator in the bushes. You might actually die if you fall into the ice water in an actual situation. But we elaborate because of trauma, because of bad training, because of not having the tools. We elaborate the signal of fear into noise. So it's no longer just like, okay, this is a threat, but I'm intentionally doing this. You know that you're not going to die or get hypothermia when you go into an ice bath for 2 minutes. You're just not going to. But still, there's this noise. What if? And get out, and you're going to get sick, or you're going to da-da-da-da, blah, 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 blah. All these lies. It's noise. And that doesn't serve us to survive. That doesn't make us better at surviving. What makes us good at surviving is being able to differentiate a real threat from a perceived threat. Trauma is perceived threat from the past that we project onto the future. What if this pain that I experienced back here happens again? Is it happening again? And then we look around and we look for cues with our nervous system and our 5 senses and our proprioception and our neuroception to look in the environment. And then we project threats that aren't even there. This is what trauma does.
Yeah.
This is a trauma matrix, and you
Love
train that when you go into the ice bath.
Yeah.
In 2 minutes, you are separating the noise from the signal. So you're honing in the fear center. Fear is a good thing when it is appropriate and it's not running rampant. It's not running wild. You know, when it's running wild, now your hormones are literally going to get thrown out of whack because of the adrenal axis, and your breathing is going to start getting rapid. And then you're going to start telling yourself all these stories about all these hidden threats, whether they're emotional threats or whether it's women or whether it's authority complexes or it's politics or it's street shit, whatever it might be. It remind you ever see the old Richard Pryor movies when you in the 80s when he would
which one?
he'd always be just freaked out.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
just one of his
Yeah,
shticks.
yeah.
He's just this scared dude
Yeah.
that's just, freaking out. That's essentially the traumatized state. That is living in a state of constant perception and projection of threats, taking simple threats and blowing them up. That's what trauma does. That's what pain does. That's what suffering does. And everybody experiences this to some degree. It's the first noble truth of Buddhism, is that everybody, if you're living, you're going to suffer. That's part of life.
Dude, so there's two things I definitely would like to address. One of them is fear. And I had learned a really great practice on talking to my emotions like they're children. But I had to, once I got past, the barriers, then I was able to actually feel what I was feeling. And so I had to learn what each feeling I was carrying was, and put a name to it. And so when I would talk to fear, I'd be like, hey, fear, what are you teaching me here? What are you showing me? And the thing you said, like the what ifs, because fear is all these what if things that are not real, and they're lies. So right. I learned also that this what if causes you to constantly spiral, and you go into a slippery slope with that what if question. Yeah. So the important thing when you're dealing with fear is what is in this present moment. So you talk to fear like, hey, fear, thank you for showing me that. I really appreciate you. I no longer need your protection right now. I'm going to replace you with confidence and trust. And what is right now? What is the truth? And I go off the truth, and that makes me feel safe. Yep. I have to constantly go into that practice. But if I don't have the conscious awareness to do that and learn from a teacher to tell me how to do that, I'd be stuck still. Yeah. And it's still something I have to do every day. I'll go, walk into the store or whatever, and I'm just feeling like anxious. I'm like, oh, hey, what is this? Hey, let me talk to you real quick. And go through that practice. Yeah. So that was one thing I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned the what if question. It really struck a chord with me, because that's what started me into understanding what fear is doing. Yeah. Because it's not the truth. And the truth is going to make you feel safe. It's going to liberate you.
It's part of the truth.
Yeah.
Because part of the truth is that the world is a dangerous place.
Correct.
And having compassion for yourself. Yeah. To be like, okay, we've been surprised before by our environment where we thought we were safe and we weren't. We've been hurt in the past when we weren't supposed to be hurt, when we were not expecting it by a loved one, by what seemed like a safe environment, by what seemed like whatever it might be. But the problem is that when we don't heal and integrate, then we carry the perceived threats, right? Even when there's no threat. And like your technique of talking to it, of sitting with it, it allows the psyche to pay attention to what is actually, through the nervous system, through the senses, is there actually a perceived threat? Does there need to be a hypervigilant state? And does the hypervigilant state serve me right now? Does having my elevated heart rate, elevated adrenaline, quick to respond, quick to react, does that serve me in the grocery store or at the party? Is it necessary? And if you do an inventory and that there's no actual perceived threat, now it's time to downregulate. I think talk therapy is great, whether you're doing it to yourself or whether you're going to a therapist. Right. I think it's a wonderful thing. for people. I also think that it can be misused.
Yeah.
And I think people misuse it a lot nowadays. People get addicted to it.
Yeah.
But understanding the self-talk, understanding how words and the words we tell ourselves and the words that we tell others about ourselves and our environments creates a reality that we live in. It creates the story. It creates the self universe where maybe everything is a perceived threat, or maybe there's not enough perceived danger, and you just get yourself into a bad situation. It just really being able to understand and inventory and audit the stories that we tell ourselves, about the past, because we project that onto the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other question I was going to ask you is there's a lot of, cold plunging became kind of a fad,
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of information out there that I've seen in perspectives, and I feel like you always have to be open to everyone's perspective.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
not everyone's built the same.
Yeah.
And so I've heard this perspective, and I don't believe it necessarily for myself, but it's the fact that you're putting yourself into a stress response for cold plunging.
Yeah.
And then it causes more cortisol in the body. And if you're always putting yourself in a stress state, it's not good for you. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to touch on that and kind of from your perspective,
Yeah.
how can we siphon through like some of the misnomers, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
about cold plunging?
It's a great question, and it's something that I'm still learning about just in my own practice. Like, why do I have an aversion to a long ice bath today when I generally, after years of doing it, it's not that I don't want to do it, it's that my body sometimes will just be like, you don't need it, or keep it short. Now, my understanding is that the adrenaline that you get from an ice bath washes out the cortisol. So generally speaking,
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
And I just don't think it's so cut and dry, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with how you're doing the ice bath and the state that you put yourself in before and during the ice bath. I haven't measured my cortisol. I know that my blood pressure is really, really good. I know that I don't have hypertension. And I do ice baths generally once a day, sometimes twice. Sometimes I'll take breaks. I think at the end of the day, you need to listen to your body after you've learned the practice. Otherwise, it just becomes another excuse to not practice.
Yeah.
Now, if a doctor tells you, or if you have a condition or whatever, then you have to do your research, right? And figure out the right medical advice so that maybe ice baths are not for you. There's not a lot of situations that I've come across where I would feel like an ice bath wouldn't help this person. Yeah, cortisol, I didn't know. I'm not aware that ice baths will create extra cortisol. I thought it was the other way around, especially if you
I thought so too.
tether it to breath work. But I think any practice can be overdone.
Yeah.
Any container, it's natural when it's in its right place. But as soon as you take it past, then it becomes another crutch and can disrupt the system. Right?
For sure.
Every practitioner is different. Like, what are you working through? What are you working towards with your ice baths, with your sauna, with your shock? You can overdo shocking yourself.
Yeah.
I
personally love it.
Yeah.
I feel amazing after. And I've done it so much that I'm able to be in a calm state when I'm in it. I go into a trance when I'm in the cold plunge.
Same.
The only thing, dude, is I cannot put my fingertips in the cold plunge. I put up my hands up because I'm in pain after.
Yeah.
But other than that,
we have
dude,
the
it feels
most
great.
pain receptors in our fingertips and in our toes.
I figured.
And also the blood vessels are the smallest. They're very small. And when you get into the ice bath, all of your blood vessels constrict and push the warm blood from your extremities into your core to essentially keep your core organs warm so that you don't die. Right? You're not going to die when you're taking an ice bath, but the instinctive process is your body, your amygdala, your brain, the limbic system is like, oh, you fell into the ice cold water. Protect the organs, sacrifice the extremities. That's why you get frostbite on your hands and feet first. And if you stay in long enough, generally speaking, the constriction of your vasculature will release and they'll dilate. And that's when the euphoric feeling, and that's when you adjust. That's when you're able to experience like that inner fire, that inner heat, if you can tap into it, which is a physiological inner fire, or dumo, is mystical in the East, but in the West, it's something that's measurable. It's brown fat thermogenesis when your body starts to heat itself. And you can train your fingertips. You can train your toes. You can warm them, actually. You could send warm blood to your extremities if you know how to do it. You manipulate your blood pressure. You manipulate your heart rate. You can do it in the ice bath. I intuitively know that you can overdo ice baths. I'm not sure exactly where that line is. I would think that it's a case by case. I don't know anyone who has claimed to, for example, get like hypertension, which would happen if the cortisol is going up. It's usually the other way around when people get tested. People generally have less cortisol, less inflammation. Adrenaline will spike. But generally when adrenaline spikes, it's the master hormone, and it sort of clears out everything else in your endocrine system when you get that spike. That's why we feel so relieved after a roller coaster ride. That's why people like horror movies. People like to get scared, because that shock is a reset. And we certainly get that shock when we go into an ice bath.
Yeah, I think so, because there also is a different state between male and female as well. Because my biggest thing is like through Chinese medicine, I know some practitioners will state that kidney qi is very important. So if you're putting in kidneys holding the element of water, and so if you're freezing it, it's not the best for kidney qi or kidney energy. And particularly for women, it can be an offset as well, especially if a woman's going through menopause, because they're losing this heat thermoregulation in their body. And so they're having a hard time regulating that overheating state. And if you,
because they're going through
a change,
right?
So I've heard through women who are at that state that it could be not as beneficial because it could spike up the heat even more.
Oh.
Particularly for women going through menopause.
Interesting.
So I have learned some of this stuff, because I've been religious with my cold plunge, and it works really well for me, especially if I get off shift. If I have if I got my teeth kicked in after a shift, or like a 72-hour shift, I got no sleep, and I come home and do a cold plunge, I get immediate relief.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm coming back to balance.
Yep.
It's like a great reset for my system. And that's why I love doing cold plunges in the middle of the day, because I have there's something kind of that pents up in a change from, afternoon going to evening.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it helps me go to sleep better. So I noticed some people say they get more energy from cold plunging. I actually will get the opposite. That's why I didn't want to do a cold plunge earlier today. 'Cause I was like, you know what? I'm going to feel a little tired after, but that's just how I am. But I've only learned through my own practice that I know what my body, how it responds, and what I need for it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's because I check in, because you asked me, hey, you want to do a cold plunge? And I was like, I checked in with myself. I was like, I probably don't think it's the best option, but
for sure.
I noticed too, like if you drink caffeine, like 30 minutes before a cold plunge, you will increase the dopamine.
Yeah.
Almost like triple the effects of the dopamine in your body and your brain as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The cold plunging has become also a fad with firefighters and like first responders because of that reason. It's really helpful. And the contrast therapy is really amazing too. Even the sauna. I mean, I was religious with the sauna prior, you know, because sauna helped me. It felt like mental push-ups.
Yeah.
I would be in there and I'd push myself to the limit.
Yep.
And I would work through mental constraints that I was carrying as well. So they're both really amazing.
Yeah.
And when I was training to be a firefighter, the biggest thing is heat. It causes people to break down and go into a fear state.
Sure.
And the claustrophobia you have when you have all your turnouts on and you're in this heat, dude, it can be kryptonite for some people.
Yeah.
And so some people can't get through it, but you have to push past that threshold with the heat because I don't know if those two extremes cause a ton of health benefits.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And with heat shock proteins and all that stuff. So
Heat shock protein, cold shock protein.
now we're going into contrast therapy. So I'd love
Yeah.
for you to talk about that.
Yeah. Shock is, I think, one of the hidden medicines that is built into the human machine or human organism. When you stay in the sauna for 15 or 20 minutes and you get that woozy feeling, the mild heat shock, from the shock, your body is creating heat shock proteins, which literally extend the telomere, which is the cap on your DNA, keeps your DNA sort of from fraying, which is aging. So heat shock proteins is literally a natural anti-aging protein molecule. Same goes for cold shock. Cold shock proteins does the same thing. The other type of shock protein that I know about is called hypoxic induction factor, which you get through breathwork, through shocking the body, through deep breathing for a long period of time, creating a hypoxic state, and that allows or creates a shock in the body. And you can, you feel it at a certain point when you get good at breathing, or when you become a proficient breathwork practitioner. But contrast therapy, going from cold temperatures to hot temperatures, it does a lot for the body. It, aside from the shock proteins, it creates a vascular workout. When you get into the cold, the blood vessels constrict. When you get into the heat, they dilate. And when there's this constricting and dilating of your veins and arteries, it creates vascular flexibility, which means that your heart doesn't have to pump so many times and so hard in order to get blood through those little tubes, right? Imagine if they're constricted, if they're rigid, right? Then the heart has to, our blood pressure will go up. The heart has to pump harder. The blood pressure goes up, and eventually the heart gives out. But when it's flexible, when there's mobility in your vasculature, it's one of the best things that you can do for your heart or cardiovascular health. Detoxing in the sauna, it's one of the main health benefits. You're sweating out all your toxins. Now, you want to make sure that you hydrate if you do regular sauna. I've seen people overdo sauna and actually just kind of screw themselves up, where they're sweating out all of their minerals, all of the vitamins. They're dehydrated all the time. So you want to make sure that you hydrate, and also mineralize. Take trace minerals and go to Inside Tracker, figure out if you're deficient in any vitamin or mineral. Make sure you're not sweating it out. And going from hot to cold over and over and over again. There was a study done in Finland over 30 years. And people who do contrast therapy 5 days a week have a 60% lower overall mortality rate.
Oh, wow.
60%. There's nowhere else where you can find those types of statistics. For a natural practice where you're not taking any type of medicine, any type of pharmaceutical, it's just hot, cold. It's magic. And it's so simple. Nature, I always say that hot and cold are nature's hidden elements. When we think about nature, we forget that the experience of heat and the experience of cold are very primal, survival, instinctive forms of perception that keep us alive. And when we flex them, it's like flexing a muscle. In our nervous system, it's flexing a power in the nervous system to become resilient. And then the body uses it. Obviously, if we don't overdo it, you can overdo heat, you can overdo cold, you can kill yourself with either one quite easily, actually. But doing it as a practice, it's also very easy to find your threshold and to just stay with that and just little by little be able to use it. I think Wim Hof is an amazing character and an amazing guy.
Yeah.
But I never recommend that people practice Wim Hof method like Wim Hof. Like, how many daredevils do I have in my classroom that want to climb Mount Everest in their swimming trunks? I'm not here to teach you how to do that. I'm here how to teach you how to access your own power. That's it. And I'm just showing you the practices for you to actually teach yourself that. I think that's what we're really good for as a community. To light a candle, you have another lit candle, and we just light each other and remind each other and show each other what works. And then you have to figure out how that fits into your practice. I'm a contrast therapy guy. I think 99% of people would benefit outside of some other conditions that they may have. 99% of generally healthy people and most unhealthy people would derive a lot of benefit from contrast therapy, from breathing practices, from sitting in total stillness for 30 minutes to an hour a day, even if a mosquito was biting their eyeball, sitting in total stillness, exercising to the point of sweating through every pore of your body, whether you're doing weight training without screwing yourself up, or yoga, or jogging on the beach, or capoeira, or martial art, doing an hour. These are the basic tenets. When people are feeling overall malaise, overall unwellness, when I'm feeling depressed, when I'm feeling in a trauma state or in psychological distress, I always ask myself, did I breathe? How am I breathing? Have I reset my breathing through a simple practice that I can do in 12 minutes? Have I exercised enough this week? Have I sat in total stillness enough this week? Right? Which is a form of dopamine fasting. Meditation is dopamine fasting. And have I shocked my system? Because sometimes all it takes for me is a 2-minute ice bath to completely snap myself out of whatever state I might be in.
Yeah,
now,
for sure.
What happens when the dopamine, the endorphins, and everything settle back down an hour later or whatever? Well, I have to deal with that. It's not enough.
Mm.
There's more work to be done, but to tackle all of the basic physiology through natural practices, I think that most people should ask themselves that. Have I exercised? Can I sit still? Or have I at least attempted to sit totally still in a silent room? Have I attempted to do a full 12-minute to 30-minute deep breathing exercise of some sort? To me, it's the foundations of basic wellness, which why get there? Why do that instead of just take a pill or take something exogenous? Well, I think that basic foundational wellness is the springboard to elevated states of consciousness, bliss, experiencing oneness, where there's no separation of you and I, to experience an egoless state where we drink from the well of the universal mind. These are elevated states of consciousness that we could read about in sutras or in accounts of whatever person was able to experience it. Now they're speaking very eloquently on podcasts or writing books or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wow, that sounds so far away. I don't think that it's far away. I think that is the natural state. I think experiencing natural elevated states of consciousness, egoless states that are embodied and powerful and mystical and often difficult to describe in conventional language, because conventional language was not designed to do anything outside of make us more efficient workers. Then we experience relief, the relief from the natural oppression, like gravity is an oppressor. Society oppresses us because society wants us to work and be productive. It's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing when we forget who we really are. Okay, we have the automatic side, the robot side that shows up, gets up on time, goes to work on time, does the things. That's a robot. That's a machine. It makes the money. It makes the world go round. It keeps society going. That's a good thing, as long as you don't forget the fact that, for lack of a better term, you're actually a spiritual being embodied in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, man, what you said hit home, dude. Like, just the fact that just the language you're speaking can disturb a lot of people, because number one, it alters our belief systems from what we're taught at a younger age. and we identify with those belief systems and we carry them out into our regular day life and how we operate. And those limitations we put upon ourselves that we're comfortable with
Yeah.
causes us to question ourselves. And people don't want to go into that state of uncomfortability.
Yep.
So the language you're speaking specifically for, when it's directed towards firefighters, they will immediately like just disengage and be like, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to that. And primarily for a lot of like Christians in that community, they're like, I don't believe that. That's against my belief system. And I think I should just go to church and ask for forgiveness for my sins. That is something that I commonly see. And the fact that you say the word mystical makes it seem like they're worshiping something else outside their belief system.
Yeah.
And I think that happens often.
Yeah.
And people would think meditation is like a form of another state of a religion, and that they're being dishonest and they're divorcing from this marriage with what they have with this devoting to this practice, right? So
when I use the term mystical or spiritual, I'm really I'm talking about an experience.
I know, dude.
Yeah, I know you understand. That. Yeah, for
and
sure.
I'm saying from personal experience that the mysticalness that you're experiencing is a place of bliss, a place of peace,
relief,
and relief
from an ego state.
Exactly,
the ego matrix, which you need to function in the world. But when you believe that you are just the firefighter and just the good Christian and just the person with this name and a date and a social security number and a linear story, and that's all you are, well, let me disturb that and remind you that you are actually the universe in a human being, embodied. You are the entire universe, and that you have the ability to tap in to feel however you choose, that you can feel relief from your suffering. You can feel relief from the not knowing who you are, even. Like, we can find states of being that are joyous, that are connected, that are that feel good. And a lot of the time we forget that. Because we're just off to the next thing that we have to get done. It's like humans are human doings. They're not human beings anymore.
Yeah, I'm in the business of, one of them is anti-aging. That's why I love these practices.
Nice.
The second one is self-realization. One of my goals and aspirations is to be self-realized in who I am.
Yep.
I don't want to lie to myself. And I want to make sure I'm living in accordance to what rings true for me. And, that always is changing in an ebb and flow state, what I mean? And so when I'm speaking on self-realization, that is a mystical experience.
Yeah.
Is when you go into the state of the truest form of who you are, is what you're speaking of. That's why I was like compartmentalizing what I was kind of like showing to you, because of this is what I've been seeing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And people they completely contract and they don't want to receive this message, this pathway, this avenue of truth that you could take that could expand beyond all horizons and you live a life without suffering. And that is like one of the messages I want to instill in people is that. And I can give an example. Like yesterday, I found myself into a state of self-realization. I was in a place of stillness with myself. And this is when I don't move at all. And usually in that state, because I've practiced it and I've exercised those channels that I've turned the radio stations on and off for a while, a few years now. Now I can go into those channels and turn whatever radio station I want on and off. And what happened is through this state of awareness and bliss, I had this realization as I was speaking to myself. I was like, oh, this is me speaking to myself. And then as I was talking to myself through a situation, I let go of that. And as I let go of that, I felt another voice speak to me. And that was another octave of who I am, speaking this truth to me, the truest self of who I am.
Yeah.
And then after that, this other false identity started telling me these lies
Right.
about a circumstance in my life. And so I had this really amazing experience. And this is a matter of maybe like 3-5 minutes of self-realization. And just to also even keep reminding myself what this state is as I'm sitting in this state of the seat of self within the confines of my own mind. You know what I mean? It was truly amazing. I mean, it was a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with religion. You know,
Right.
it's a devotion to myself.
Yep.
And I think the more I experience these awakenings, the more I climb the elevator shaft.
Yeah.
And as you go up these elevator shafts up into the higher dimensions of who you are, the higher octave of who you are, you find the truest divinity within, that you're a shard of the source of all creation.
That's right.
And we are coming back to that.
That's right.
The thing about that elevator shaft is you can quickly come back down
Yep.
to any whatever level you want to go to.
Yeah.
And when you go down there, you realize, oh man, this place is messy. There's rats crawling around. And this is still a part of me. This is still who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really want to be here anymore. And for some reason, I was tempted to come down here to this state because it was just comfortable through years of being there.
Right.
And I don't want to be here anymore. So now I can elevate myself. And usually it comes with practices that take you to that state.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this kind of came into a really beautiful philosophical, part of this episode, because, it comes through, me breaking through the barriers of my own self to find the liberation, and it's through conscious effort, really, because in the end, you can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what you're stuck with is your consciousness and yourself. That's it.
That's it.
And you have to be comfortable in your skin with that.
Yeah.
And you can disassociate however you want with anything, man. It doesn't have to be with drugs and alcohol. That's just a form that is really toxic to your body and it will really harm you. But you can do it with anything, with prayer, church, meditation.
Yeah.
But what we're here to do is to be in this human form and connect with one another.
That's right.
And tell each other our experiences and look at each other's eyes and see the universe in each other.
That's right.
That's what I've come to see. But I'm in a place where I have to open up my heart in a world of hell. And so I have to come, to talking to meth addicts and seeing that same vision, that light, that spark in their eye and try to find it some way, somehow. Or talking to an asshole supervisor who's just talking down to me like I'm a dog.
Yeah. Cog in the wheel.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have to find that in each and every piece. And that is the lesson.
Yeah.
That is the practice.
Yes.
That is the true spiritual
That's
form.
when it becomes real in the moment.
I always say that, monks are cheating because they put themselves in isolation and asceticism, right? And like celibacy because they're cutting themselves off, and when you cut yourself off, you're not having the full capacity
experience.
to challenge yourself and what we're here to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've been tempted. I've been tempted to retreat into monasteries before or do my mountain, cave retreats for long periods of time. And I remember that there is all of that and more that this world has to offer. And it's like you said, it's more difficult, but you reap more accomplishment from being able to maintain your state of consciousness that you're choosing versus an accidental state like a fear state or an ego state. When you're able to choose your state of consciousness in a world like this that's fast-paced, Gurdjieff, the philosopher Gurdjieff, called it the psychological gymnasium. And say, don't retreat from the psychological gymnasium, go into it. And I think that's a really good and powerful place to live your life from, to not have to turn away from the world, but to embrace it. I think that everybody is capable of it. It just takes practice and it takes remembering and reminding each other. I think that's why practice is so important, and community practice, having a space to practice and to reset, and then to reset again, and then reset the nervous system. It's a foundation. And I think it's very, very important.
Yeah, I love how you put in the perspective, like you're coming to a remembering.
Yeah.
Because this is stuff we already know.
We were born
It's dormant
with it.
within. We just have to learn how to unlock it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the whole point here is you're not retrieving information that is foreign from you.
Right.
You're just going back to the true nature of the self.
Right.
And once we are able to do that, we're finding that it's in each other, man. And and we're also here to help people unlock that by just being in their presence.
Right.
And that's the truest form of light. Lights will find other lights.
Yep.
And even in the darkness, we cannot hide from the darkness because it's still gonna be there. You know,
we need it,
and it's a part of the
part
balance.
of us. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, man, it's true.
But it's like I think that causes a fear state to be in the darkness. You know what I mean? But I think
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
it should.
The shadow work part
Absolutely
has become a thing of what Carl Jung had offered to just therapists.
That's right.
To put at least a label on it, to see what it is, and put a face to it.
Yeah.
And through some of my own teachers, they have taught me to put a face or a name to something, so you know what you're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So you have an idea of whenever it comes into your consciousness or into your life, into your field, that you can find out, what that is.
Yeah.
And whether it's stubbornness, whether it's jealousy, whether it's anger, you know what I mean? You have to now, you had talked about earlier, compartmentalizing these things.
Right.
Because you can be overwhelmed by the noise or the trauma or the past experiences. So I've always told people the way you can compartmentalize it is like envisioning a house, and each door, whether you want to open it or not, has something inside of it. But every time you open that door and you look to clean it out, there's always a gift waiting for you at the bottom of the rug that's just filled with furniture and stuff you've stuffed in there. Yeah. And then you can close that door once you've cleaned it out. Now you got to move on to the next door. Right. Whether it's a relationship with your mother or your father. Man. And now you can know what each door has in store and the gift that it had offered to you from the very beginning. But many people don't understand how that compartmentalization works. Right. They can get stuck, you know, and I don't feel good in a messy room. Same. Like if I was told, hey, you have to study for this test, right, and the entire room is cluttered and filled with stuff, I can't do it. I can't focus. Same. You know what I mean? Or retain the information. Right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I hope people can take that perspective and use it, because it's so valuable, and you can journal with it and you can use it in a practice, like 5 minutes. Like, hey, what door do I want to open right now? Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And what's beautiful is, like you had mentioned, like even plant medicine, is I've noticed people who've done plant medicine, those medicines open those doors for you. Oh yeah. And so people think, these are magic bullets. No. And they're actually mirrors.
A lot of the time that it will plunge you into darker places that you have to deal with. I've experienced it many times with ayahuasca, where ayahuasca will simulate the experience of dying and going into the ground and being eaten by worms, and sitting with that discomfort, knowing, I have experience. I know that it's just an experience on the ayahuasca. I'm not actually dying, but it can feel so real. And then having, shadows from the past come up, things I regret, things I never did, all of that. And to be able to sit with that as if I was really dying puts the rest of my life in such a deep perspective. I get up from that experience and I'm like, okay, I know what I want from this life and what I need to work with and what I need to work on and who I need to work on it with. Whether it's a family member or a past friend or just me and myself or my career, or what am I doing in this world? What's my point? It's like the Stoics say, when you remember your death, and the Buddhists say it as well. When you remember your death, it puts everything else into perspective. And you should remember every day that this could be your last. So what are you going to do with it? And that's what darkness is good for. That's what remembering your death is good for. That's what suffering is good for. It reminds you that you need to get free. It reminds you that you have purpose here. Your purpose is not just to suffer. Your purpose is not just to think about your death or just be afraid for tomorrow or whatever it is, or be ruminating in the past. It's about doing your work and liberating yourself and experiencing life the way you choose to experience life. And you should choose to experience life in a higher form, in a higher state with the highest self that you could visualize.
Yeah, I think what's important to understand too is as you grow, your responsibilities become more vast. And as you're working through, your own self, right, to find liberation, you'll hit another ceiling.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to do more work.
Right.
And because it's this higher capacity to hold more things is growing within you. And so you have to be cognizant of that as well. And that's why people want to be comfortable in their old ways, because they don't want to have more responsibilities. They want more shit on their plate. But
That's right.
That's where evolution comes. It's like where we get to that state. It's like, okay, I hit something really hard here. I hit my head against the ceiling.
Yeah.
Where am I at right now? And how can I get past this and find the responsibility I need in my own life and stick to those still, but make sure I'm able to hold that capacity to just strengthen myself to push through this resistance. Because all persistence will overcome any resistance. You know what I mean? If you persist, it will fall, but it takes a strong version of yourself that is dying, that's shedding off of you to get to that point.
That's right.
And so sometimes in order for something to come into that space, something has to leave.
Right.
So that's why suicide ideation and these things have come forth, is because it may not be that this is the end for you. That's not what's actually happening. It's a cycle of life that no longer serves you, and it's dying off. And you have to understand that. But if we don't understand the cycles of life, that it's not linear, you have to let go of what's not serving you any longer.
That's right.
And it comes in, I'm glad you brought up plant medicine a little bit on your own experience, because I just learned from a friend of mine that there is a retired firefighter who lived in Costa Rica who was doing breathwork ceremonies and ayahuasca, and he just killed himself.
Yeah.
And
Usually the healers are the ones who are struggling.
Right.
Self-healers.
The wounded healers, right?
Wounded healers. I've been accused of that myself.
So I was really caught off guard by
every
that,
human being has a death urge. And the death urge is this primal urge to get to the end of something, to finish. And you have to remember that life is not about finishing. It's not about a work to be finished. It's not about legacy. It's not about accomplishing something. Like you said at the beginning, it's not about this. It's not a straight line. It's about riding the cycle. Death is going to happen, and it's going to be infinite. So the rush to get there, I don't believe spiritually it solves any problems. I think it creates more. And the death urge is a very delicate thing that we have to learn to work with, especially if you're suffering and you're in pain. It's a very delicate subject. It's a difficult subject. I've had some very close friends commit suicide, and I've thought about it a lot over the last several years. And it's tough, especially when those people are like people that you've worked with, or you've shared practices with, and you've experienced higher states with, and that death urge is still there, and their pain is still there. How do we work with it? I haven't figured it out. It's a very sad story about that person in Costa Rica, and you hear about that. It happens.
Yeah, that's why I think, it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It's just a mirror.
Yeah.
Just like everything else is.
Yeah.
Just like you and I, we're mirrors to one another. And you have to have a greater awareness to see it like that.
Yeah.
But someone has to point it out to you as well.
Right.
But yeah, I've only been hearing about different people's experiences, and it's wild to see people use that as a disassociation. They want to escape. We all just want to escape.
Use what as a dissociation?
Plant medicine.
Oh, sure.
Because they want to escape and just get to, but it's going to take you to the root of your problems.
Right.
And find out what it is that you need to see.
Right.
In order to fully integrate your life and move forward from there.
Yeah.
If
you're doing it right.
Right. And yeah, you need to do it correctly. And there comes with taking indigenous practices done for thousands of years, there comes teachings that go along
Yeah.
with it. You know,
Yeah.
if we try to figure out ourselves and go back into
That's a
the
problem.
mud, you know,
Yeah.
that's not going to work very well for you.
I think it's really important to recognize that the ancestral traditions, that there's thousands of years of human experience that's passed down from mouth to ear.
Mm.
And to do it right, you need to drink from that well, whether it's kung fu or plant medicine or meditation. It's great to figure things out in books and to experiment on your own a little bit, but there is a great pride that I see people experience where like they don't want to learn from other humans. They think they can do everything themselves. It's crazy. You're literally shutting off so much knowledge from trying to do that, because other human beings who have more experience than us in a given subject can share so much insight. You know, like your Sifu, when you ask him about chi, you can't find that in a book.
No,
And
not at all.
and you might find it on your own in 30 years of practice.
Yeah.
But what about everything else that you could have been doing for those 30 years? Ask the Sifu. Yeah, it's a very, very sad story. I think a lot of people use plant medicine as a fancy spiritual drug.
Mm.
I mean, I'm guilty of it. I've done it.
Mm.
That's why I don't do plant medicine that much these days. I do it when my body craves it. And it's less and less. You know, sometimes I need the reset, so I'll go deep, or I'll either I hold some ceremony, or I'll go to someone else's ceremony. But I think any practice, no matter how sacred, no matter how divine and how auspicious, can be utilized as a buffer to life instead of a tool to remove the buffers and the layers.
Yeah, I just noticed through my experience of serving combo and being introduced into that field was I've heard so many people have profound healings with plant medicine. So I started opening up this platform to having people talk about it, because these medicines allow people to heal in other realms.
Yeah.
You know, and they're able to heal on the spiritual side.
Yes.
We just had an episode last month or so, a Navy SEAL who serves Iboga.
Yeah.
You know, and that medicine's super powerful,
Sure,
man,
yeah.
but super dangerous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of danger to that medicine from what he tells me on the side, not on the episode.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the healing that happens, it is so profound that it's like, from what someone had told me, it's like you're walking up a staircase and you have some missing steps.
Right.
And these medicines allow you to pull the railing to get past those steps, those burdens, or whatever you have missing in your life to get forward in your life.
I know
it's a rapid process.
Ibogaine has actual physiological, medicinal elements that help people, especially with heroin addiction.
Yeah.
That aside, non-ordinary states of consciousness, meaning a state of consciousness, when I say state of consciousness, that is everything you're experiencing, physiologically in your body, emotionally in your heart, the thought processes in your mind, the way you feel about the environment, the way you feel about life in general. All of this could be combined into a single point of experience in this moment. That's your state of consciousness, right? The state of your nervous system, heart rate, perceived threats on the outside, all of this, the stories you're telling yourself, the shadow world in any given moment. It's this ever-changing matrix that we can boil down into a single point and experience with our awareness and say, this is my state of consciousness. The default mode, state of consciousness, is rational, logical, linear, production-based, work-based, material-based. It's based in past and future. It's based in stories that tell you who you're supposed to be, that you hopefully at least feel some comfort with, but generally speaking, there's some discomfort there too. It's the ego state, which isn't a bad thing. It could be very useful. But when you're only locked into that three-dimensional state of consciousness where everything has a past and a future, everything either has a reason or it's bullshit. Everything it's either logical or you throw it out the window. It's either related to your career and your production and your rent and linear time, right? that's good for survival
Mm.
in its compartment. But to only experience that is to experience profound separateness. Non-ordinary states of consciousness are states that go beyond the ego story. And that's why we have to use terms that are more philosophical, a little bit more superfluous, terms like mystical, spiritual, because we don't have a lot of language for states that are beyond language
Yeah.
and that are beyond stories. Plant medicine is good for us in that sense because it gives us a gateway to a non-ordinary state of consciousness where you see and perceive and experience the vastness of the universe, the oneness with other living beings, the foolishness of the linear story and linear time, the essentially like the uselessness of just being an automaton worker.
Mm.
And this is very liberating. And I believe that there's medicine just in that, being able to sit in a non-ordinary state of consciousness where you can see that the ego is just a lie or just a fabrication that's good for some things but is not complete and actually separate, small, and built on a lot of trauma and suffering. Plant medicine is not the only place where you can get to non-ordinary states of consciousness, right? You can get it through spiritual practice. You can get it through shocking the body and using the basic elements at Human Aeon. By doing deep, deep breathing practices, you can start to experience non-ordinary states of consciousness. There are other ways to do it, but a non-ordinary state or an altered state of consciousness can be and should be a very healing, very medicinal. Because how could you feel happy living in the shell of your ego day in and day out? How I don't see how that could be completely fulfilling. And we can make a life of plant medicine and practices that actually just become another ego self.
Yeah.
That become that default. There's danger to that.
Mm.
Yeah,
I've seen that happen.
I've seen it happen many times. It's
Yeah.
happened to me. It's happened. I have to struggle with that.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I live in a wellness temple. I'm the abbot of a modern, non-religious, non-spiritual temple. And not only am I living there, this is a place where people are emoting, crying, letting out trauma. There's a lot of energy there that I have to work with. It's a lot. And that's become my default mode. It's a tricky path. It's a tricky path. And sometimes it gets to me emotionally. Sometimes it's a lot. But it's very fulfilling. I want there to be more. I found out that there's a couple other people that are going to be trying to build some similar projects. And at first I was like, oh, y'all are just going to come to my place, learn my formula, and go and start something down the street and not even talk to me like as a friend, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And at first my ego is just like, man, what the you should at least talk to me.
Mm.
And I think back to myself and I'm like, actually, I want there to be more of these.
Mm.
If your little ego is too scared or whatever to come and talk to me about your project and you just want to become my business competition, do it. Because I want there to be more wellness sanctuaries here. I'm not doing this just to pay the bills. That's not what it's about, anyways.
Dude, that's good, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love how you brought up like that ego state, and ego is tricky, man.
Yeah.
But the best way to pierce through that ego state is our patterns, our behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
And our behavioral patterns are tricky in themselves because they become these sinister strategies that maneuver around how we try to claim ourselves and our innocence through making someone else suffer or feel terrible about themselves or projecting your own self through a tricky spiritual identity you've created.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
so if we pay attention to our patterns,
Mm.
it really opens up the gateway to the truest form of who we are, because we can notice it in an instant.
Right.
And patterns will always stick with us forever. It's just
Mm.
how quickly can we clear them and notice
Mm.
how they present themselves.
Yeah, man.
But as they lead and they lead our life, we're not living in our truest form of who we are.
That's right.
You know, so our patterns, like I can tell you one of my patterns is stubbornness.
Right.
I'm a stubborn motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
And as I opened the gateway or that door to stubbornness, I realized it was a way of protection for myself. Because as I opened up that door, I would go into, where did it start?
Yeah.
It started in my childhood,
That's right.
you know? And so I can see what fed it,
Yeah.
what programs I allowed to enter and now create an algorithm in my life.
Yep.
And so that's a great state to where we can go back to the basics, back to the
man.
foundation is
Yeah.
our patterns.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm supposed to do a keynote speaking on behavioral patterns.
Nice.
And I hope to, you know, whoever's listening out there, let me speak at your conference. No,
Nice.
but it's about that and understanding, coming back into the heart-based consciousness,
Right.
because that is where we're supposed to live in our hearts. And when I say this, people really get caught off guard. Like, hey man, like that's some hippie shit.
Right.
But we're designed to live in that space,
It's true.
because that's where the truest form of who we are operates. And the logical mind is going to try to disturb that.
And if you look at it like the patterns, like stubbornness, it's really just a survival instinct that was taken too far. And that survival instinct was actually there in the first place to protect your emotional space. Stubborn to survive, stubborn to complete a project, stubborn because you're right about something and someone else is wrong and they're trying to push it down your throat. You should be stubborn. But then it's when we take that pattern and we apply it to everything. It's like trying to build a house just with one hammer. No, you need a saw. You need nails. You need all of these other elements. Any ego state is just a survival pattern that's taken and applied to the wrong domain. So there should be compassion there, because your stubbornness is also probably a great superpower. You know?
Oh, for sure, man.
For sure. So there's
Man.
it's always light and darkness.
Yeah.
And even the dark side of the ego, there's something there that is precious, that is there for a reason. It's just out of place.
Yeah.
And it's just practice and just readjusting and remembering, okay, do you want to eliminate your stubbornness? No, you need your stubbornness to save that kid from a burning building. Motherfucker, you should be stubborn. We need you to be stubborn. Right?
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, no, it's truly
we love
amazing.
you for it. Like, we literally, society needs that.
Yeah, it's a kaleidoscope.
It's a
right?
kaleidoscope.
You know, you really have to, and there's not any right or wrong answer, man.
Yeah,
and, you know,
that's
but
right.
you just have to know what doesn't serve you, what's not going to benefit you in that moment.
In that moment.
You know, and it takes practice to see it. You know what
It takes
I mean?
our whole lives.
Yeah, it takes a whole lifetime, man. It really does.
And I just hope that, like, when people hear us talking about this type of work, I know that it can sound daunting, especially if you haven't approached it yet, whether you're a firefighter or a teacher or whatever you do in your life, but that it's actually rewarding, it's fun, it's meaningful. You can do it in a lighthearted way. It doesn't always have to be like hard practice, you know, ayahuasca death experiences, or, you know, climbing a mountain in your swimming trunks with Wim Hof, you know, and being in the freezing cold weather for 12 hours. Or these are great things to shock the body. But like being able to shift our states, being able to experience what's on the other side of an ice bath, being able to understand, like, why am I going to do deep in breaths and slow out breaths, or long exhales with less of an in? Like, why am I going to shift my pattern this way instead of that way? This is all very, I think it's fun and enjoyable to be able to experience the state that you want to experience, which, like Wim Hof says, should be happiness, health, and strength. You know?
Love to
man.
end on that.
Yeah.
We're coming up on time.
That's
but,
right.
yeah, it was a good conversation, man. I didn't expect it to go this way, but
Thank you.
It was rad.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
For some reason, dude, I was gravitated towards you. I don't know.
We were
what
just like
happened.
sitting next to each other in the sauna.
Yeah.
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 I was probably sitting half lotus meditating.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a meditator. Probably something like that.
I don't remember, man, exactly how it came up.
Yeah.
It's crazy, dude. And then when I kept meeting people who knew you,
yeah,
I was like, dude, I got to reach out to that guy and like, have him on the podcast, so it was really organic.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's a pleasure.
It's really rad. So, thank you so much, brother. If you want to have how do people plug into you?
Yeah.
And so forth, if you want to describe all that stuff.
Yeah. So Human Aeon, you go to humanaeon.com. It's HUMANAEON. Humanaeon.com is how you would come and visit the wellness sanctuary here in Long Beach. You could follow me on Instagram, although I don't post very much these days. It's Reed Wasser, first and last name. Human Aeon on Instagram is where most of the content is being delivered to. And that's basically it. I do workshops and classes, maybe a couple a month. Every once in a while, I'll lead a session. If you book a session, you can ask for me. If I'm around, I will lead the session. Otherwise, it's one of my instructors, like Vanessa, who's amazing. She's the manager at Human Aeon. She's a great breathwork instructor and can lead you through the ice bath and the heat and all the different things. Also, Sean Hertel is a new instructor whom you met at the Human Garage the other day. Yeah, we're open 7 days a week. Humanaeon.com.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you can subscribe to our podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, really helps the algorithm. As people get a hold of this, that can help them, and so forth. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I love you.
It's time for Crab Lies.